Today I want to explain something about the fact that there's always been two kinds of religion: the priestly and the prophetic. The priestly religions have always served the interests of the kings and the rulers and helped people to adjust to and maintain the status quo. And the prophetic religions serve the interests of who Jesus called the least of these in society. They aren't least, mind you, by Jesus' definition, but rather by a worldly definition. They're the least and the last and the left out. The prophetic traditions seek to benefit the oppressed, the poor, the outcasts, and the voiceless. Prophetic religions seek to upend the status quo for the liberation of all humankind. We're not in need of salvation from some original sin that eternally taints human souls. We're in need of salvation from the human tendencies towards tribalism and self-interest. When it's all said and done, and we're judged maybe by God or by our neighbors or maybe just by our own conscience, as we sit on our deathbed and review our days upon this earth, we won't be judged on our doctrinal purity or sophistication of belief. We'll be judged on what we have done or not done for those society counts least and puts last. In the words of the late great minister William Sloane Coffin, let us all remember what Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi never forgot: how frequently compassion demands confrontation. Let me repeat that. How frequently compassion demands confrontation. Now, you can probably tell I have a little burr under my saddle this morning, as you all say here in Oklahoma. If we were in Ireland, I'd have a burr under my kilt this morning, which to me sounds a little bit more aggravating, especially considering what Irish people, I understand, wear under their kilts. Or not, or don't. Well, let me tell you how it got there. Last week, I read that in the month of July, 164 Muslim women were sentenced to a public flogging for crimes as absurd as wearing trousers in public or having sex outside of marriage in countries as far away as Sudan, the Maldives, and Malaysia. Now, according to an article by Mona Eltawi, the most famous of those 164 is Lubna Hussein, a Sudanese journalist who was among 13 women arrested by police at a Khartoum cafe on July 3rd and charged with violating the country's decency laws, quote unquote, decency laws, by, get this, wearing pants. 10 of those women accepted a fine and a flogging, but Ms. Hussein and 2 others contested the charges, which they are now fighting in court. It's bizarre to use the word lucky, she says, to describe a woman facing 40 lashes for wearing trousers, but by virtue of her position and clout, that's exactly what Ms. Hussein is. She's also brave and defiant, says Eltawi. Get this. Ms. Hussein resigned her position as press officer for the United Nations, which could have earned her immunity from the charges, in order to stand trial. And most importantly, she's a Muslim woman who knows that a flogging for wearing trousers is sheer and utter nonsense. She said that she's ready to receive even 40,000 lashes if that's what it takes to abolish the law. El-Tawi continues, not so lucky have been the thousands of other Sudanese women, Muslims and non-Muslims, that have served as the whipping girls for the Sudanese regime's cheap game of flogging women to show off its quote-unquote Islamic principles. The International Criminal Court has indicted President Omar Hassan al-Bashir of Sudan for war crimes and crimes against humanity. His Janjaweed allies in Darfur have been accused of rape. Trousers are indecent, but rape is just another reminder of how useful women's bodies are in conveying the message. Now, Mr. Bashir is an unabashed dictator. So we've come to expect this kind of senseless barbarity from him. But how then do we explain the silence of the Maldives' liberally inclined President Mohammed Nasheed at the flogging sentences handed out to 150 of his countrywomen in July for sex outside of marriage? It's depressingly simple, El-Tawi says. To appease Islamists who he needs for his ruling coalition, he offers up the easiest chips to bargain with: women. Now, if you really want to understand what a public flogging is like, I hear that you can search online and find a video showing the Taliban flogging a screaming woman in Pakistan's Swat Valley. But be assured, it's not for the squeamish. Mind you, these are adults. Adult women. Now, on a more positive note, what also happened this past month was that former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, a person who many people consider a great man, even if they didn't consider him the best president, wrote an opinion piece published in the UK Observer titled, "The Words of God Do Not Justify Cruelty to Women." You may recall that a few years ago, Nelson Mandela brought together the living Nobel Peace Prize winners from around the world to form a group called the Elders. The group includes Carter and Mandela and Bishop Desmond Tutu and Muhammad Yunus and Kofi Annan and women such as Aung San Suu Kyi, Mary Robinson, Ella Bhatt, and other eminent global leaders who are all Nobel laureates. These are people who many of us have come to love and respect for their wisdom and their courage and their successful efforts at creating positive change. The message that former President Carter wrote, which I will read excerpts from in a moment, was written as one of the first public announcements of an effort that the elders have committed themselves to try and ensure that women and girls around the world be treated fairly and equally. These are Jimmy Carter's words. I have been a practicing Christian all my life and a deacon and a Bible teacher for many years. So my decision to sever my ties with the Southern Baptist Convention after 6 decades was painful and difficult. It was, however, an unavoidable decision. When the convention's leaders, quoting a few carefully selected Bible verses and claiming that Eve was created second to Adam and was responsible for original sin, ordained that women must be subservient to their husbands and prohibited from serving as deacons and pastors and chaplains in the military. This was in conflict with my belief, confirmed in the Holy Scriptures, that we are all equal in the eyes of God.